Right guys, back with another video. Since having some overcurrent protection issues on my Corsair HX1200i, I decided to look for other power supply options, and luckily Niels from Seasonic was kind enough to send me the 1300 watt platinum rated Prime series power supply unit, which was released this year among the new titanium rated Prime series units that are a little bit lower on the wattage ratings. And today we will be taking a quick unboxing and overview of this unit, what it comes with and how it looks like, and also talk a little bit about these units in general. So there's a lot of controversy about these high wattage power supplies. Many people still ask what is the point on buying a unit like this when computer components do not normally require this sort of power. But I can tell you that there's an absolute need for units like this. There are many use scenarios where a high wattage power supply like this is required. For example, the Intel X299 socket CPUs, AMD's Threadripper, and all the upcoming CPUs to both of those platforms, like the Intel 28 core, they all do require a lot more power in general than the more sort of mainstream socket CPUs, especially when you start to overclock them at least. And also, if you have been following my recent videos, I already mentioned that I was able to pull 500 to even close to 600 watts on the mainstream socket 8-core CPU, the Intel 9900K, which is a huge value considering that it's just a mainstream socket CPU. And the high core count X299 CPUs can pull even close to 1000 watts when they are, of course, heavily overclocked and cooled with some exotic methods. But anyways, these units are really needed for testing scenarios like this. And also, this unit here, how it differs to the Corsair HX1200i, this is a pure single rail power supply unit. So it does not have that too idiot-proof 40 amp current limit per connector, which was causing me huge issues with the Z170M OC formula, as I couldn't run the maximum speeds with that unit when it was on the edge due to power requirements. But generally, power supplies are a lot more than just pure wattage. When we talk about overclocking, we want a unit that has very low ripple on the main voltage rails. This is just to ensure that we can reach the best possible speeds when there is not much voltage fluctuation on the main key rails. And also, we want a unit that is, of course, efficient, so it's going to run cool and quiet, even at high wattage loads, and also that it's reliable, as power supplies in general are more sort of long-term investments. Considering that the unit here has a 12 years warranty, it's pretty much certain that you don't have to upgrade a unit like this in close to a decade, unless there's some new radical change in some of the upcoming platforms that could make the old power supplies incompatible, like what we saw with the original Haswell CPUs when they came out. So as some old power supplies could not handle the extremely low idle voltage of those CPUs and didn't work with them due to that. So and also, what is a good thing about these Prime series units from Seasonic is that they are not so expensive compared to some of the competitors. This unit here, the 1300 watt platinum PSU, goes for around 230 to 260 euros here in Europe. Here in Finland, when I last time checked, it's around 260. So it's still around 50 to 100 euros less than some of the competitors ask for a similar type of unit. And considering the 12-year warranty, it's not that big of an investment considering the longevity of the product. And the worst thing you can do really is trying to save money on a power supply if you are, for example, choosing expensive high-end parts like X299 motherboard with a high core count CPU and some power-hungry graphics card. You have to remember that power supply is the key component in the system that can take everything it's connected to with it when it fails and dies pretty much. We have seen this happen many times in the history of computers already, so it's wise to choose a unit you can trust on, so that it's reliable and not going to cause any issues or any damage on other components that are connected to the system. And also, when we talk about overclocking purposes, we often want a unit that can run the entire system. For example, when we do a lot of testing, we often have a power-hungry CPU combined with a high-end graphics card like 1080 Ti, 980 Ti, the new 2080 Ti, or even some of the legacy power-hungry monsters like the GTX 480. It's not an easy task to run the entire system, so the CPU plus the GPU and all the minor components connected to the system of a single power supply. And when you start to mix different power supplies together so that they all run and turn on at the same time, it's a little bit of a mess. So what's the good thing about the Prime series units is that they have quite an overbuilt like specs. For example, the previous version, the 1200 watt platinum rated Prime series unit, had overcurrent protection at around 1600 watts. So it's 400 watts above the actual rating. So we can pretty much expect that the 1300 watt version is going to be at least the same level. So it has a lot of headroom over the rated value, and thus able to run a radical combination like what I just mentioned. So for example, a 7980XE plus 1080 Ti for some cases at least. So it's a nice thing to have. So the unit itself comes in a quite plain silver packaging, although it looks pretty nice. All the key features are already mentioned on the box, like the efficiency rating, the warranty, how high wattage the unit is rated for. And on the side of the box we can see that all the cable lengths are already mentioned, which is a very nice feature to have. And on the back side we can read more features about the unit. So fully modular cable design, that is pretty much a standard nowadays when we talk about high-end power supply units, so you should not expect anything less. Multi-GPU configuration supported. So yeah, of course you are limited on the PCI Express cables, but yeah, you could run even 4 GPUs off this single power supply unit if you really wanted to. 135mm dynamic bearing fan, which can run at least partially in passive mode. So when the unit is under just some minor loads, the fan will turn off completely if you use the hybrid mode, which is a nice feature to have if you are really picky on really picky about sound levels. And of course it mentions that high quality components are used, but that's really much expected when we talk about a unit like this. So the packaging of the power supply is pretty simple. What you get is your user guide, some accessories we get to later. nice AC power cable to connect the power supply to your mains power in the wall. This is a nice feature to have. This is a 24-pin jumper connector, as you can see here. What this does is, when you connect this to your 24-pin, it will force the power supply to turn on, aka doing the same thing as pressing the start button on your motherboard. So for example, if you are building a custom water loop, when you first fill the loop with water, you can power cycle the system to fill the system without turning on any of the components, which makes the building process much more safe. And also, when I run the Kimping Cooling Inferno backplate on my overclocking sessions, I run the backplate from a secondary power supply, and I also require this part when I use that, as the only thing that is connected to the secondary power supply is the heating backplate. So when I use this, I can keep the power supply on all the time, the entire session, and thus making sure that the heating backplate stays on all the time. And what comes in the box, we have some other installation guide about the cables and how to place the unit. It seems some zip ties, large Seasonic sticker there, and some other cable ties to tie your cables down, tie your cables together to make the cabling look better in your case, and some installation screws and a heavy, or I should say hard, case badge. And in the bag here we have the unit itself. Yeah, I must say the unit looks pretty nice, considering it's just when it's a 1300 watt model, it's actually not that big considering the measurements of the unit. So when looking at the measurements, the power supply is around 17 centimeters in length, and on the width it's 15 centimeters. So it's relatively small in physical dimensions, considering it's a 1300 watt sized unit. So this should mean that it's very compatible with most of the cases out there. There are many competitive power supplies out there that are much bigger than this. So it's relatively small considering the size of this unit in terms of watts. At the back of the unit we see the hybrid mode, so you can choose whether you want to run the unit in partially passive mode, on-off switch there, plug for your AC power cable, and on the front side we see all the cable connectors. So there's your 24-pin CPU, PCI Express, and all the peripherals like hard drives, Molex, etc. There's not really that much about when talking about power supplies. Here you see the 135mm fan. So and of course it sucks air this way and pushes it out at the back. So make sure how you when you put this in a case, that you align it in the correct way to make sure that the power supply runs cool. So in the box we find two different types of power cables. Firstly, we have these nicely black colored braided cables, as well as some bare non-braided cables for the SATA and Molex power. The braided ones are fairly long and easy to bend, so it should make cable management really easy. And the black color should fit most of the system builds really well, as black is a very common color. And if you wanted to change the color scheme of these power cables, I'm sure you can find some aftermarket options, or you could make the different colored braiding for the cables yourself. The power supply unit itself features two 8-pin power cables for the CPU, as well as 12 power cables for the PCI Express, so it's surely more than enough for any type of use scenario. So you could run 4 individual graphics cards of the single power supply, including the 1 or 2 supplemental PCI Express power connectors for the PCI Express, which most of the 4-way capable motherboards usually have. And in addition to those, the unit has 6 power hookups for the peripherals, so for SATA hard drives and Molex power and so on. So yeah, those are my first impressions of the Seasonic 1300 watt platinum rated Prime series power supply. The unit itself, all the technical aspects as well as the features that it comes with seem very good. The cabling is looking really nice as well. I will be replacing the Corsair HX 1200i with this unit here, and see how well it can handle the 9900K as well as the high core count X299 CPUs when combined with some high-end graphics cards as well. I'm really excited to see how well it can perform in different types of load scenarios. But other than that, if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.